Saluti a tutti, and welcome to this episode of Ciao DMV, Italian-American Life in the DMV. My name is Joseph Barone, and I will be your host. This podcast channel is dedicated to all things Italian and Italian-American in the DMV, aka DC, Maryland, and Virginia. My focus is on the Italian-American experience, from family stories to little-known history to businesses to cultural events, etc. This is the final episode of a three-part series with Dr. Bruno Damiani. Dr. Bruno, as I like to address him, is a former professor of Romance languages and literature, specializing in the Spanish and Italian Renaissance at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. He is an accomplished scholar, author, editor, lecturer, and consultant. In addition, he is the founder and chairman of Scripta Humanistica Publishing International. This episode actually consists of three separate interviews with Dr. Bruno. First, his life after CUA, and which publications he believes have made the greatest contribution to his field of study. Second, the honors which have been bestowed upon him in recognition of his work. And finally, what I like to call the Volpe Project, his research assignment into the life of John Volpe. So, let's get right into life after CUA and his most important publications. So, you left CUA towards the late 1990s. Of course, technology is changing at that time. More people are using computers and the internet is really starting to begin. But what was life like for you after you left CUA?
Good question. I have maintained contact with a good number of professionals around the world, professors and students of professors who write to me, who ask me for bibliographical information concerning the topics that they are working on. So I receive such requests on a fairly regular basis, and I'm very happy to accommodate their demands, their requests, I should say. So that takes part of my time. The second is I continue to participate at professional conferences. I read a paper from time to time because I enjoy the contact with university professors. I try to help students, as I mentioned, and encourage them to participate at certain events that I'm aware of and they are not. So I communicate with them and say, look, there's a Congress on humor, for example, coming up in Lisbon. I think you should participate and so forth. So many students that have been advised by their professors around the world, look, you should reach out to Professor Damiani. He can help you about that. So I'm involved in doing what I think I can do best, which is to assist, to help, to guide forthcoming, students in the profession. I do that. And that's another reason why I participate in these conferences, congresses around the world. Not too often, but 2-3 times a year and so forth and so forth. I keep in touch, of course, with the academic world throughout. And from time to time, I receive proposals, drafts of proposals given to me or being sent to me by various universities that I have helped in the past, and a variety of fields, literary or interdisciplinary study, wanting my guidance on how to perfect a proposal to ultimately be sent to the National Endowment for the Humanities. In my role as consultant for the endowment, in the past I traveled to maybe 50, 60, 70 institutions or more in the country, making site visits to those universities that had requested federal funding to create, to develop, or to improve their academic programs. I've been to Puerto Rico 52 times in a period of 10 years, never for the exclusive purpose of a vacation. It turned out that I would take an additional few days, but the primary purpose was precisely to visit and make recommendations to the endowment on the merit of any given proposal. So I continue to receive such proposals, making recommendations, and I'm assisting universities, colleges that are applying for grants, institutional grants, on how to improve. Obviously I acquired an expertise in that, and I've been able to help institutions receive federal funding for the purposes they wish, And then, of course, I dedicate a considerable time to developing and promoting Scripta Umanistica, which is a series that I was invited to create in collaboration with a Spanish publisher many, many years ago. And we try to encourage young scholars to publish worthy manuscripts, because it's the best way to advance academically. And I'm very happy to do that with the support of several members of the Lido Civic Club, even, to assist these scholars, young scholars, religious scholars, lay scholars, to get their work in print.
Talking about literature, thinking back on your career, when you look through your CV, I've gone to the website and I've gone through your CV quite a number of times. You have written and published a huge amount of work. The volume is huge, whether it's you directly or working with someone or editing. It's just an amazing amount of work over your life. But thinking back, what would you say are the 1, 2, or 3 pieces that you published that really have made an impact upon your field of study? And we can just take a moment to focus on each of them. So if there's one that comes to mind right away, probably the one that you say is this one is like really the premier one, what would that be?
I would have to say that is the very first work published, which is the portrait of La Lozana Andaluza, that ultimately Warner Brothers turned into a film. I mean, that gave me immediate visibility worldwide. I mean, it was an incredible experience for a young man to see that. And the fact that there were like 22 reprints of the volume, it became an obligatory text in Renaissance studies around the world. I mean, students were required to purchase that work as part of the seminar or course that they were taking. Following that, I moved away from the picaresque novel.
And for our listeners, what do you mean by the picturesque?
Picaresque.
Picaresque.
Yes, the word comes from picaro, which in Spanish means a rogue. So basically, it's a narrative of a young protagonist, be a boy or a girl, who from early on, because of dire economic condition, is forced to make a living by his wits, serving one master and then another and another and another, and each master is a representative of a social class. So it talks how this individual, young boy or young girl, growing up in a society which is sometimes cruel, abusive, serving a master, a nobleman, a cleric, a successful businessman, and so forth, so that you and I as readers get a view of that society where there is obviously thievery in order to survive. There's the wits of the protagonist in order to make to make a living of sorts and so forth. But these works focus on the message that the authors want to project. That is to say, the social satire, the abuses of the nobility of those who have, and the suffering of those who have not. It's a type of literature that teaches the reader much about the society of the 16th or 17th century, the novel of roguery, which later expanded in Germany with Grimmelshausen, Simplicissimus, in France with Les Sages, Gil Blas, and Moll Flanders in England, and on and on. It caught on quickly. The Spanish novels were subsequently translated quickly in German, in English, in French, and so forth. It caught on quickly. It became a sort of universal literary form, which was studied extensively throughout Europe at the time, and even today in literary courses of the Romance languages. It is, and that is what the novel of roguery or picaresque novel means. From there, I moved to the pastoral novel, and my best work there was published by the University of Kentucky Press, which is Montemayor's Diana, Music, and the Visual Arts, which is right behind you there on that shelf, which talks about pastoral literature, but not pastoral in the sense of the religious sense. These are shepherds. They live in an idyllic setting, and they move in a rustic setting and a semi-mythological way, conversations that they have among themselves, generally touching on social, philosophical, and religious themes, although they themselves are not religious figures. And it is a profound form of literary expression. Sister Linda Sariego, who now serves as chair of the department at Newman University, for example, chose to write on La Diana, the dynamic spaces in La Diana exactly is the title of that work, which I gave a copy the other evening at our good colleague Vito Germinario, who has been so interested in making sure that both his high school as well as his university, specifically St. Peter's High School and St. Peter's College in New Jersey, acquired the entire series because he was so, Vito, our colleague,
of course,
was impressed with that, and he has continued to sponsor some of these and to make sure that the libraries there have the entire collection. And then basically a collection of studies combining articles of mine in a variety of fields. But I would say that the principal works for me professionally have been La Lozana Andaluza, the very first publication, and the biographies of Francisco Delicado, the author of La Lozana Andaluza, and biographies of other authors of the 16th and 17th centuries, that have touched the gamut of the Italian Renaissance writers and the Spanish writers.
In this segment, Dr. Bruno discusses his research into the life of John Volpe. Now, for those of you who don't know, John Volpe was the son of Italian immigrants from Abruzzo. Even though he established a well-known and very large construction firm, he is most noted as the governor of Massachusetts, Secretary of Transportation, and U.S. ambassador to Italy.
Another chapter of my life that I would like to single out for the importance and the impact it had on me in the course of my professional life, which has to do with a call that I received from the president of the university, Clarence Walton, several years ago to ask me to see him in his office because he had something very important to share with me. Briefly speaking, he called me. I went to see him, and in short, he asked me if I was interested in accepting an offer from a New York publisher to do the research, the life of a very important Italian-American, very well-known Italian-American who was involved with the National Italian-American Foundation as a president and was particularly recognized as being the only three-time Republican governor in the Democratic state of Massachusetts. John Volpe came from very humble beginnings, origins. I immediately accepted the offer, and I spent a month in Nahant, Massachusetts, at the private residence of the governor. I was given carte blanche in going through his files and so forth. I was fascinated by what I learned about his family and about himself, the success that he had. And to complete that, I went to Italy, to Pesco San Sonesco, a remote village in Abruzzo, to look at the archives of the parish, to find out something about his parents, who humbly came to America, the father being a wonderful stonemason, and in a period of 2-3 years established the Volpe Construction Company, very successful even in creating some buildings in Washington D.C. That experience gave me the opportunity to not only go to Italy as a guest of Prime Minister Andreotti, who put me up as his guest for 1 month in Rome at Piazza Colonna Albergo Nazionale, right next to Palazzo Chigi, which is, of course, the official office of the Prime Minister of Italy. He, Andreotti, in turn, took me to dinner to meet President Giuseppe Saragat, Via della Camilluccia, number 22 in Rome, where we had dinner with former President Saragat, his daughter, and the four of us were having dinner in this majestic-looking salon room, call it what you will. And I was impressed by the library that President Saragat showed me, filled with classical Greco-Roman literature in his library. The episode of my being involved in the Volpe project subsequent took me to see and meet President Nixon at the Waldorf Astoria, where we had the suite and we had lunch together, speaking about John Volpe, whom he admired, keeping in mind, of course, that the Volpe family contributed significantly to the Republican Party, which explains the proximity that the Volpe family had with President Nixon, who appointed him as Secretary of Transportation and subsequently ambassador to Italy. In the course of my project, on the Volpe project, I was escorted by the Central Intelligence Agency to McLean, Virginia, to meet the director, former Admiral Stansfield Turner. At the time that Volpe was ambassador to Italy, of course, he had to report to Ambassador Volpe, and an agent of the CIA told me anecdotally, he said, when you meet the admiral, ask him if it's true what rumors are circulating, that when he was Supreme Commander of Allied forces in Naples, Italy, he would move the entire fleet toward the coast of France because he's very fond of French food. So when I was taken up to his office in Langley, I started my conversation with him by saying, Admiral, forgive me for asking this question, but there are voices around saying that when you were Supreme Allied Commander in Naples, you would move the entire fleet. He began smiling. He said, Professor, that is not true. I would move half of the fleet only, and so forth. So that was an interesting experience I had, spending a few hours with Admiral Stansfield Turner, who at the time that I met him served or was serving as director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Following that, the agenda was prepared, I think a combination of the CIA and the FBI. The next person I was to meet was, of course, Nelson Rockefeller. And you can see, of course, pictures of me with these dignitaries and Webb and so forth. And we spent a couple of hours having breakfast there at the Rockefeller Center, who obviously spoke enthusiastically of his association with Volpe. And Nelson appreciated greatly, he mentioned that explicitly, the contribution made by Italians and Italian Americans in the United States. And in Italy, I met scores of diplomats that Prime Minister Andreotti introduced me to. And the evening we spent with President Saragat was truly memorable. And the generosity of the Prime Minister towards me was incredibly significant and much appreciated by me. So that is something that I will always remember, with a great deal of gratitude for the opportunity given to me to explore everything in the life of John Volpe, who ultimately became a close friend of mine as well. And I dedicated 1 year of my life in the Volpe project.
And who did you turn all the research over to?
To the university first, which in turn passed it on to the editorial board of New York, of Stuart Bollinger, I believe. I would have to go through my records here. And ultimately, what they did, they selected an author to collect all of my material for the publication of the book.
In this final segment, we discuss some of the key honors bestowed upon Dr. Bruno. This has been a wonderful, wonderful series of conversations I've had with you about your life, whether it be your early life, getting to CUA, and afterwards in your literature, the publications that you feel have made the most impact on your profession. One of the things I'd like to talk with you about today, or have you discuss with us, is that you've been recognized. You've received some very, very prestigious recognitions, awards, honors. And so I'd like to have you share with us for a couple of minutes about the awards that you've and honors that you have been bestowed.
Thank you. I would have to begin by saying that an award of great significance to me was the one that I received from my students at Catholic University, to the point that the university to this day has kept the meaning of that award by creating the Bruno Damiani Award for Teaching Excellence, an award that is given annually to a professor chosen by the academic community of students. It gives me great pleasure and an honor, of course, of gratitude for that. I also, of course, very dear to me is the award that I received from Pope John Paul II, the saint, and so forth. In the context of that award, I need to say the following. That one evening, I received a call from Jude Dougherty, the former Dean of Philosophy at Catholic University, who asked me if I was free on that particular coming Friday evening, and I was. He said, Bruno, I would like to invite you to meet the Polish cardinal. We're having him for dinner at the university. Are you free? Well, what do you think my reaction was? Of course, but please understand that when he said the Polish cardinal to me at that time, the only Polish cardinal that I knew of was Wyszynski, who had suffered extensively under the Soviet Union and so forth.
And which most people here in the U.S. now forget him. They don't remember him and the suffering that he did.
he did a lot. He suffered a lot, imprisonment and so forth. So I told my wife then, my then wife, you can't imagine that Jude called me to invite me to dinner to meet a Polish cardinal. Then I explained to her who he was. To make a long story short, I go to the university, Curley Hall. I see the doors opening up. At the top of the steps, I see this statuesque looking individual. And I said to myself, that is not Wyszynski. I walk up the 6 stairs there, and Jude Daugherty, Bruno, meet His Eminence Cardinal Wojtyla. I said nothing, but when he introduced me to the cardinal named Bruno Damiani, Wojtyla, Carol, said, ma lei è italiano, vero? From that moment on, all in Italian, and Jude set me next to him at dinner. You can imagine the conversation that he and I had in Italian, and so forth. Unforgettable experience for me. Subsequent to that encounter, I received the Benemerenti Medal, which I have here, as well as that decree for service to the church, and so merit to the church. Very nice. I hold that dear to me, of course, for many reasons that you can well understand. And then the Hispanic Society of America granted me that award there for my contribution to the understanding of studying of Spanish literature. And they recognized me with that. Following that award, the Corpus Christi knighthood, which I received thanks to the Chilean ambassador to the United States, whom I had the pleasure of knowing, and he being the director of the organization, invited me to go to Toledo, Spain, and the pictures for all of that are on the other room. There's not enough space here, so I put it later. I'll show you that. So I went to Toledo, Spain, and I was given the uniform of the knight and so forth, and also very dear to me, of course, and a great honor to have received the title of Caballero de la Orden de Isabella Católica, given to me here in Washington by the ambassador from Spain, and that in recognition of whatever I have tried to do pertaining to presenting Spanish literature from a variety of perspectives, as indicated in the studies that I have done and the publications I have made. And I had dinner with the Spanish ambassador recently. I thanked her, of course, for all of this. And I said, what about the horse? She started laughing. And I said to her, well, I mean, who has ever heard of a caballero without a caballo? And she said, llegará, which means it will come. I have not yet received it, but if one day you see me at one of our legal meetings arriving by horse, please make sure to get some hay for the horse and that. I would think that these awards and the awards from the Catholic Academy of Sciences that, I was given, and you could say, well, how the Academy of Sciences give Bruno an award? Well, it's related to what I have done at Creighton University, the Jesuit University in Omaha, and also specifically the University of Puerto Rico, in conceptualizing a proposal that would link the medical science and the medical preparation in the medical school to the ethical part. And I was instrumental basically on conceptualizing the new curriculum for the medical school of the University of Puerto Rico to combine not only the customary courses related to medicine, but also to make sure that future physicians, would also receive a good measure of training in philosophy and ethics, particularly applied to the medical professional. So by virtue of that, I was given that award by the American Academy of Sciences and so forth. And I think really that says pretty much everything about the award.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much as we end the series with you. I cannot thank you enough for sharing your time, opening your office and your home to me to be able to come and do this interview with you. It is so greatly appreciated. And I think this will really give especially the members of the Lido Club, a real eye-opening, better understanding of you and the immense work that you've done in the field of Romance languages and history and literature. I think this is just fantastic. Thank you so much.
My gratitude goes to you for the time you have given me, for the opportunity you've given me to share my thoughts about various stages of my personal and professional life. And I wish you continued success in propagating the work that those of us who are Italian and Italian American have a lot to be proud of for the opportunities that this country has given us. Truly, we have been blessed with such opportunities that even the Prime Minister of Italy, former Prime Minister of Italy, Giulio Andreotti, told me once in the context of one of my projects when I was his guest in Rome, and he said, I say all these things with you with a sense of almost trepidation, knowing that this beautiful country of ours in Italy probably would not have been able to give you the opportunities that wonderful country of the United States has done. And these are the words of Giulio Andreotti, former Prime Minister of Italy.
It is my hope that you've enjoyed this final episode with Dr. Bruno Damiani. And if you wish to learn more about him, you can visit his website at brunodamiani.net. And please remember, if you enjoyed listening to this episode, please take a moment to like, comment, subscribe, and/or share with a friend. This is Joseph Barone, your host, signing out. Ciao, DMV.